This is Michael Popok, Dark Glasses, Dark Sky. It's time for Legal AF After Dark. Kamala Harris, former prosecutor, attorney general, senator, vice president, now the presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party, prosecutor versus the felon. Who can bring this issue more acutely to bear than Kamala Harris? I break it all down on Legal AF with another former prosecutor, state prosecutor, and Karen Friedman Agnifilo, and we talk about the unique qualities of Kamala Harris as a former prosecutor, as she counterpunches against Donald Trump inside, outside the courtroom, and takes it all on. Take a listen. Karen, what's your initial gut reaction? We talked about it. So much has changed since last week when you and I were last on. Would he? Can he? Did he? He has. And now we move forward as a party in a unified way. There was speculation about primaries and whether there was going to be a contested primary selection process. And quickly, the Democratic Party looked at each other and said, we've got a successor to Joe Biden and what he's done. And her name is Kamala Harris. Talk to me about your initial feelings about Kamala Harris, former prosecutor, former attorney general, former vice president, former senator, and could be the first woman president of the United States.
Well, first, I just have to start by saying I'm a little misty-eyed from that speech from President Biden. I mean, what a great guy. They just don't make them like him anymore. And what I love about him is he never changed. He never got dragged into the mud. He never allowed himself to get dragged into the mud. He always kept his head up high and remained the same really decent person who's a fantastic president. And he's just a public servant. And he was quoting the Constitution. He was quoting the Federalist Papers. He was just absolutely, I feel like, wrapped in the flag and very patriotic. And I just love listening to him. And really, I'm so grateful that I got to, in my lifetime, have him as not just vice president under another probably greatest president, also my lifetime, Barack Obama, but also here. And just also the decency to know when to step aside and to do what's best for his country. He just really is a true public servant in the best possible way. And boy, is that a contrast to who Donald Trump is, who only thinks of himself. So I just loved what he had to say. And I just feel so grateful. Anyway, but to get to Kamala Harris, I have a little Kamala Harris story that I'd love to tell. When in 2010, when Cy Vance, who was the Manhattan DA, was elected, and that was the first year he started, he tapped me to be the chief of the trial division, which is basically the head of all the trial lawyers and the head of all the investigations. And there were a lot of people who said to me, who thought that I was not the best person for the job. I was too young. I was not qualified. I didn't have enough experience. You know, all the things they say to women that they don't say to men. And Cy Vance, he definitely elevated me a lot higher than certainly at the time. I was honored and really excited to do the job. And he said to me, I want you to meet a good friend of mine, Kamala Harris. She is probably the best prosecutor I know. She's brilliant. She's an amazing woman. I think you'll love her. And I think she'll give you some good advice. And at the time, she had just been elected the Attorney General of the state of California. She had been the district attorney of San Francisco. And before that, she was a prosecutor in a nearby county. It's Alameda County in California. And so she came up as a career prosecutor, a lot like I did. And we are of similar age. And we're both from California. That's where I'm originally from. And Cy Vance thought that she could kind of teach me and mentor me and just give me advice on how to lead a prosecutor's office that handled 100,000 cases a year. And I had 350 lawyers that were under me. And it was a really, really big job. And so I flew out to California for something unrelated to that. And we asked if she would meet with me. And so I went to Sacramento, which is the capital of California. I went to her office and I was sitting in the conference room waiting for her, and I'll never forget it. In walks the most dynamic, put together woman I probably ever met in my life, Kamala Harris. She walks in, and for an hour she spoke. I did not speak. And she says, I'm going to give you advice. And she gave me, I took notes. I just sat there and wrote and wrote and wrote and gave me notes about, as a woman, as a prosecutor, as someone in public policy, as somebody who's going to work for the elected DA, all the things I could do, all the lessons she learned, all the things you can do to not just manage cases and people, but to also make meaningful policy change and to maximize every issue that you have on your agenda, whether it's through community involvement, whether it's helping people, whether it's legislative change, whether it's education, that everything has multiple components. And it was like the best advice anyone had ever given me. And it was 1 hour. And then she walked out as fast as she walked in. And it was absolutely, I was stunned at how brilliant and amazing she was. And that was in 2010. And so when Joe Biden tapped her to be vice president, I wasn't surprised at all. I thought she was just one of the most impressive women I've ever met in my life. And now I think, of course, she's stepping up and she's going to be unbelievable. And I love what she's doing already and how she's really just coming into her own and taking command. And I don't know if this was intentional or not, but I love that the timing of it was that the Republican convention was all about Joe Biden. He's too old. He's this, he's that. They spent all their energy and all their money and all their efforts basically tearing down Joe Biden. And he eliminated that issue right after and turned it over to Kamala Harris. So I'm not surprised that they're already starting with the same exact things that they were talking about Letitia James or Fani Willis or every other woman of color that they love to talk about. And I just love how she's giving it back to them, And of course, they're using things like, she's a DEI hire, and which is sort of code for the N-word. It seems like these days, and just again, she cackles and she laughs, and it's like, since when is a woman who smiles or laughs a threat? It's like crazy to me, the things that they're saying. And she's just coming out and she's like, I love the contrast that she has prosecuted sex offenders. He's a sex offender, right? He's been adjudicated as a rapist. She's prosecuted fraud cases. He's been adjudicated to be, a fraudster in the Arthur and Goron New York civil fraud case. She has prosecuted criminal fraudsters, which he's a 34-count felon for fraud in Manhattan as well. I mean, just everything, the contrast could not be there. It's like opposite day. And she's the anti-Trump. And it's just such a breath of fresh air. And it takes away the Hunter issue. It takes away the age issue. It takes away everything. I mean, they'll manufacture things to say about her, and we'll go from there. But I'm just loving every second of it, and I'm not surprised, and it brings a smile to my face.
Yeah, I'm glad that you told that Kamala story. So is our audience. That setting up the thematic of the prosecutor versus the felon is so smart for so many of the reasons that you touched on. We actually have the clip. I mean, right out of the box, her first rally, this was the sound bite.
So as Leah told you, before I was elected vice president, before I was elected United States Senator, I was elected Attorney General of the state of California, and I was a courtroom prosecutor before then. And in those roles, I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type. promise you, I will proudly put my record against his any day of the week.
I love her so much. Oh my God. She's amazing.
As I said on my social media, it just got real. And she can make arguments as a 59-year-old woman of color prosecutor with a successful track record, body of work that she can put up against anyone, let alone that airbag criminal that's running on the Republican side. And I think if this is going to be, and it fits so neatly on a bumper sticker, the prosecutor versus the felon. And it's going as they corner Donald Trump, as only Kamala can, as they corner him like the rat that he is, he's going to, we know, because he does it every time, he's going to fight back with misogynistic, racist comments that are going to go after her. He led, let's not forget that not only is his party racist, this is the party that in 2000 went after John McCain, the war hero part of the party, when they ran of robocalls in South Carolina that asked people, would it matter to your vote if you knew that John McCain had an illegitimate black child? He had adopted a Bangladeshi girl. And it's that low ball, below the belt, that even in their own party, they went after. They call it, this is this is a group that first cannibalized their own. And of course, they're going to turn their attack on somebody of color. They've been using this DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion label, as you said, as a substitute for many, many racist tropes, including the N-word. You've got Donald Trump, when he had another top law enforcement who happened to also be black and a woman, in Letitia James in New York. He called her Peekaboo James, which is not even code word for jigaboo, which is a terrible racial expression. His constant patter is to dehumanize his opponent, especially if they're black or brown. Alvin Bragg is an animal, in his words, that should be put out of his misery with a baseball bat. Letitia James, Peekaboo James, Kamala Harris refusing to get the pronunciation of her name right. They're all being made into the other, into subhuman. And now, in addition to that, and I want to hear your opinion about prosecutor versus felon, and then I want to talk about the lawsuits, the inevitable lawsuits, the floodgates that the Republicans following the Heritage Foundation are going to file against her to try right now in July, not November, to delegitimize her presidency should she win. We believe she will, should she win, and to in order to try to act like she is invalid and doesn't have the right to occupy the Oval Office if she were to win. And they're doing it now, not waiting. They started it with Joe Biden, but now that they know that it's Kamala Harris, it's Kamala Harris. Let me go back to you on the prosecutor versus felon thematic. A, do you think it's effective? And B, will it work? And C, is she ready? You've met her. Is she ready for the inevitable having to counterpunch when they do fly spec her record? And I'm sure there's going to be something in her record, somebody that didn't get the death penalty, something that she did about the drug policies in California. There's going to be something that they're going to try to Willie Horton her and try to make it racist on top of it. Her approach to Black Lives Matter and bail reform, whatever it, George Soros, you can see it. I could write it now. So give me your overview of how her as a person, as a candidate, now 4 years, she's not the same Kamala Harris as when she went in. This Kamala Harris, how does she, in the next 4 months, make the closing argument that she needs to make against Donald Trump?
Well, they can look in her background all they want. They're not going to find that she has sexually assaulted anybody, that she's lied, cheated, stolen, thievery, committed crimes. I don't know, paid off her porn star. You look at her background, is there going to be a case that somebody thinks she should have done differently? Could she have made a mistake? Perhaps, she was the elected DA. She was the attorney general for the whole state of California. So, of course, there's going to be cases that people think should have gone differently, or mistakes were made, or whatever it is. Of course, that will happen. But is she ready? Oh, she is more than ready. This woman is so smart, so put together. And frankly, she's a trained prosecutor. And the thing about being a trained prosecutor is you learn how to have thick skin, because you have to. You learn how to build your case, which she will for herself. And you learn how to, as a trial lawyer, how to break it down and explain it to people so they can understand it. And she has all of those skills. That's what she has done her entire career. So it's not, yes, has she been an elected official? Yes, but she came up as a line prosecutor also, just like me, right? Like that's what her background is. And P.S., prosecutors, you're tough. You take on violent gang members, you take on rapists, you take on serious criminals. So she's tough. So whatever you want to say about women, and they like to make women weak and all that kind of stuff, she is as tough as nails, and she will be able to fight. She's a street fighter. She's a state prosecutor, not a federal prosecutor. So she's a woman after my own heart, because that's where you get your street fighting street cred. And that's how she came up. And so she can handle her own. I am not worried about her whatsoever. And frankly, she's going to be an unbelievable president. I cannot wait to watch her win this election. But I agree with you. They're already trying to delegitimize it. They're panicked, and they're already trying to sow the seeds that the election is somehow stolen, because he doesn't like to accept fair results. So I think it's a brilliant move on the, it's funny because people were thinking, who's it going to be? And it is absolutely the most brilliant move. She is ready. She is qualified. She has spent the last 4 years essentially looking over the shoulder of the president and watching, training for the job. Like, she's had on the job training. And so if that doesn't prepare you for the president, she has literally been in the room where it happened. So she is absolutely ready. She is the best candidate by far, and she can take on Donald Trump. I mean, in some ways, I think this is her comfort zone, because if she were to take on some super intellectual historian, she might, whatever, to like debate some great orator, I'd be intimidated by that. But as she said, she knows Donald Trump's type. He's just a common criminal. She can take him on and wipe the floor with him with her eyes closed. So I'm super excited to watch her. This is her sweet spot.
To your point, I remember when my wife and I, we were engaged then, watched the inauguration, and we watched her come out with her white outfit, and my wife and I both turned to each other, and I looked at my wife and like, how do you feel right now with a woman vice president? And she said, my hair is standing up on my arms. I'm so proud. And we were. And I think she will be, for those that faulted her at times for being whatever as a vice president. In other words, I think she had a difficult job. She had a President Biden who we love, and we had a post-COVID era. And there were certain things that were her remit that were given to her by the president, but they weren't as public. She really came into her own after the Dobbs decision in advocating for women's rights and for women not to be second-class citizens in this country, and reproductive rights and all of that. They're going to go after her for the border issues and some other things that may or may not have been part of her remit as vice president, but she wasn't co-president. She was vice president, and there's a certain lane that you have to stay in, and she did a very good job in supporting the president of the United States. But when people voted for Joe Biden, they knew there was a possibility, he was older then, that she could, at a moment's notice, have to step into the presidency. And they voted overwhelmingly for Biden-Harris, knowing that it could have been Harris as the president by over 7 million votes popular. And then, of course, a good, clean wipeout in the electoral votes. And now, like you said, Karen, she spent the last 4 years learning from one of the best about not just, the get policies passed. Because Joe Biden, one of his great gifts, and the reason he was so accomplished and has been so accomplished as a president in getting bills passed and getting legislation passed, is because he's from the Senate. He spent 40 years there. He knew everybody and they respected them. And he knew how to work legislation and get it through. That was one of the if Barack Obama had any weakness, it was working Capitol Hill. And getting certain, after the big push and the big heavy lift of Obamacare, sort of didn't continue throughout the rest of his presidency. Not for Biden. Biden has been, as they said in the Hamilton show, he wrote like a man who was running out of time. And I mean that literally. He knew he was either one term or, he was a certain age, and he definitely moved with a vitality and an energy level that we have not seen before from much younger people occupying that office. But now it's Kamala's turn. And look how quickly the entire party got behind her. I was sitting with friends before he announced, speculating that he would announce over the weekend. And we quickly started talking about what would be the process to pick the next person. And it kind of broke out into, we need a primary, quick. We need a contested. That's what Pelosi wants to. I don't think so. I think we have the person that's been trained for this and we voted for in succession. And she's right in front of us, and her name is Kamala Harris. And look how quickly the delegates all got behind her. Now we have to work as an audience and on the MeidasTouch Network and on Legal AF to sort of circle the wagons around Kamala the way the Republicans and MAGA have done so around their felon convicted, rapist adjudged candidate. And the Democrats have to take a page from that book. She's going to get attacked for her relationship with an older man in California who was the Speaker of the House, who they claim she had an affair with, and that's how she got her job. Another inappropriate attack on women that would never come if the gender was reversed. We're going to hear that. I've already heard it from MAGA people in the periphery of my life and their little palm cards and talking points about trying to tear down Kamala. And the other way to delegitimize her, especially if they know they're going to lose, which I believe they really think there's a chance now even Trump wakes up with a sweat in the middle of the night that he's going to lose against her, because she can just run on the Biden-Harris body of work without having the baggage of Joe Biden. And now that Joe Biden has done this patriotic thing, there's a lot of halo effect around him and a lot of respect and adulation about Joe Biden, which I think actually transfers down and to the energy flow that's now going towards Kamala Harris. He's no longer potentially a drag. We can just celebrate Joe Biden and what he's done and her role in that administration. So it all comes together. Welcome back. We got a show. We got a podcast. Call it Legal AF for a reason. Now you know why. We sit at the intersection of law and politics twice a week, Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on this YouTube channel and on the MeidasTouch YouTube channel. And you can listen to us here. You can watch us. You can get us on every major audio podcast platform. We curate the top 4 or 5 stories at the intersection of law and politics just like that, and we bring it to you in an hour-long or so podcast. If you know everything about Legal AF, you're part of our audience. We really appreciate you being here, and thank you for being part of our build. We're doing it organically. We're doing it by word of mouth. And if you can take that clip, though, that little bite-sized version of Legal AF, send it off to people in your life and ask them to join our audience. That's the way we grow. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, but you watch other MeidasTouch content, we welcome you and we offer this to you. Come join Legal AF Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Until my next Legal AF, until my next hot take, this is Michael Popok reporting. Heary. Legal AF Law Breakdown is now in session. Go beyond the headlines and get a deep dive into the important legal concepts you need to know, and we discuss every day on Legal AF. Exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, all for the price of a couple of cups of coffee. Join us at patreon.com/legalaf. That's patreon.com/legalaf.